up until January of this year, believe it or not, 75 to 80% of our business was in the export control and sanctions space. And then for some reason, customs compliance has become the cool topic. We now do a lot of work in the tariff space too.
Before we get started with the show, here's a quick word from our sponsor, Global Training Center. As trade compliance professionals, you want to make sure that your procedures and documentation are completed as correctly as possible to avoid any delays and possible fines. We provide a range of trade compliance courses that will fit your needs. From in-person or web training to recorded on-demand courses, we can train one or even thousands on your team through your learning platform or on our portal. We can even customize a private session for your team. Go to globaltrainingcenter.com to find out more.
Hi, everyone. Thank you and welcome back to our Simply Trade podcast. We are right now recording. By the way, Andy's not here today, so he's traveling, and so he couldn't make it. But we had already lined up this episode, and he expected to be here, but I guess it was bad weather or something, and he had to stay overnight wherever he was at. So anyway, but we had planned this show. We were previously, I would say about a month ago, we had a really great guest, Steve Johnson, and he said he recommended couple of things. We're still trying to line it up with another group that he suggested that we should talk to, which we're very excited to set up, because that would be more like a panel. And we like talking to panels because there's a bunch of ideas that come up through those panels. And secondly, he said, hey, maybe you should talk to this person. I work very closely with her, and she has some really great ideas, and she does really good things in trade. So we reached out, and so here we are. So we have on our show today, we have Miss Ellen Smith, and she is the CEO and president and founder of Amalie Trade Compliance, right? Or trade compliance. And she's going to correct me. I'm all day. I mean, like Andy and I always say, we'll get corrected. She does have well over 20 years. I'm going to say probably even more than that. I don't know how old the bio that I found might be, but I know I know I've heard of you, Ellen. I've never met you in person. I apologize about that. But here at Global Training Center, we have several instructors. We have a wide range of instructors. I mean, at any given time, we can say we have about 20 instructors that are on our bench, meaning we can always call on them and they can do training for us. And I believe 2 or 3 of them in the past have referenced or talked about you or your firm being able to help any of our clients if in case they might say, hey, I need help with X or Y or Z. And we may have indirectly referred some people to you all. But I don't know. It doesn't matter. But anyway, but I have heard of your firm, and we have some knowledge about that. But anyway, welcome, Ellen. Thanks for agreeing to come on our show.
Thank you, and thanks for the referrals too. Always appreciate that. Thanks so much. And I'm thrilled to be part of the show. I've heard tremendous things, and I enjoy listening to it myself. But I'm Ellen Smith. I have been doing this for a really long time. I started my career back in the late 80s, believe it or not. Somebody said recently the 1900s, and that just sounded really bad to me. So I'll go with the 80s. I started my career at a freight forwarder because I graduated from college and took the first job with a company that had international in its title because I thought that meant I could travel. It did not. But I then went to law school while I was working at the freight forwarder. And in the meantime, working full time, going to law school, got married, had a kid, bought a house. I don't know how I did all that, but I did it. And eventually it got me here. So I was in private practice for a while, and then went in-house to Jockey International, where I was the compliance counsel for Jockey. Jockey, of course, is underwear and apparel company. And so very focused on customs compliance and tariffs. Have you heard of tariffs? I don't know if anybody's heard of that word lately. And then in 2010, I moved to Houston, Texas, to join an oil field services company that was under investigation by the DOJ for export control violations and FCPA violations, and they needed to build their compliance program. So I was fortunate enough to sort of join a dream team of compliance folks, both on the ethics side and the trade side. And we built a compliance program really quickly that really met the obligations, and the regulators just really thought we had done great stuff. I then got recruited to another oil field services company where I ran their global trade compliance program for about 7 or 8 years. And then in what was it, 2020, I say I had my midlife crisis, Lalo. My youngest daughter went off to college. It was the middle of the pandemic. The day before she left for college, my dog died, and I just came home from dropping her off and quit my job, because that's what a normal person would do. I was part of the Great Resignation during the pandemic, and I decided to, after talking to a few friends, decided to start Amalie Trade Compliance Consulting. We pronounce it Amalie, rhymes with tamale, so if that helps. But it sounds good however you pronounce it and in whatever accent you have, so anybody can pronounce it any way they want. The name came about when I started this company. It was just me, and then I had one other colleague who was with me at my last employer, and she joined me. Her name's Katie McIntosh, and she's a program expert. And we decided to make a go of this. The name comes from my 2 daughters. They're Amanda and Natalie, so it's the first 3 and the last 3 of their names that came together. And yeah, today, 4.5 years later, we're about 37 people. We've got a team all across the United States, and we just opened our Philippines office, and we're opening an office in the EU, hopefully by the end of the year or next year, but hopefully this year. So we're growing quickly, and I think it's because we're program people, and we just really believe in programs. And that's really what, I like to talk about, is what is a good program. Everybody talks about, the regulators all have their guidance notes out there about compliance programs. They all really boil down to the same elements, but they also say you have to have an effective program. You have to operationalize your program. And I think we've figured it out at Amalie, and we really enjoy helping companies mitigate their risks through the program. I love talking about what I think operationalizing a program means, or what an effective program means. And but frankly, I always start out conversations by talking about what is trade compliance, because I think every time I go to a different company, they have a different setup or a different definition of what falls under the trade compliance umbrella. So at Amalie, we think of it as sanctions, export controls, import or customs compliance, and then anti-boycott. And those are the areas we really focus on from a compliance perspective. There's a lot, of course, in each of those pillars, but that's really what we focus on. Up until January of this year, believe it or not, 75 to 80% of our business was in the export control and sanctions space. And then for some reason, customs compliance has become the cool topic. And we now do a lot of work in the tariff space too. So for an old customs lawyer like me, that's fun. I enjoy doing that kind of work. But really the idea of a program, I think, falls across all of those different pillars. And to be able to keep up with all these changing regulations, you have to have that program in place to do that.
No, exactly. And that's prior to the show, I always like to ask guests, what what is it that you're passionate about, or what is it that you really like doing? That, by the way, whenever we're talking to guests, we normally the number one question is, what do you want to talk about? And I always tell my guests, whatever you feel is your passion, or what you like to talk about. What is it about trade that why you're in the business, and because we like to get that kind of guest, where if you talk about that, then that's amazing, because what happens is that then the audience or our listeners will definitely get a good feel as to, oh, this is what we can learn from, or how we can grow, et cetera. And I really like the way you explained on how you like to build programs that are resilient, that are programs that are not going to like quickly answer. I mean, the way I took it anyway, I mean, you gave me a brief explanation and I expanded beyond that, to me it meant, I'm not going to build a program where I'm just going to answer today's issues or concerns or challenges. I'm going to build something that, it'll do that, but it'll resist any or some. I can quickly pivot or adjust if something dramatically changes in a month or two, which of course these days it's happening a lot. Starting in January up to today, I think I heard somewhere that we're about at nearly the 100 days of President Trump's presidency, and of course that a lot has happened in 100 days. I mean, with regards to trade, of course. I mean, a lot of other stuff, but we're here about trade. And because of that, programs obviously need to be bulletproof, if you want to call it. I think you called it a plug and play. What exactly, I mean, let's start there. Like, what exactly did you mean, or what do you mean about plug and play programs?
Sure. Well, I think my belief is that to operationalize or make an effective program, you have to build out procedures that can plug into any function or any activity in a corporation. And I think that's why I love trade so much, is because we do interact with every function and every activity in the company. I think a lot of folks think about, trade compliance, that's supply chain or that's logistics. But really it's HR and it's IT and it's finance and every other, and legal, every function and activity in the company. So these trade issues that come up really depend on which function or activity you sit in. And we can sort of isolate where those are going to be and what those issues are going to be. And draft sort of high-level procedures that can then be plugged into a desk or work instruction of a function or activity in a company, so that if they're doing trade and they don't even realize they're doing trade compliance, because it just becomes part of their day-to-day operations. And I think that's sort of the secret that we've come up with at Amalie, and in my previous roles too, when we were building programs in-house, is to come up with this way where we're building it into day-to-day work instructions of every function, every activity in the company. And if a regulation changes and we need to refocus on a different issue, a different specific issue, we just go back to that high level procedure that we wrote, that we use to plug in to the work instructions, and we tweak it.
In working, I mean, you're wanting to create a framework, of course. I mean, every effective company or business, even personal lifestyle, you have this framework. You define per se, what are your goals and how you might approach those. And in some cases, when you're building that framework, you come up with what is the minimum that I need to do or create to be successful or effective. And then in my case, or my experiences, then you also set this goal that is like this, like blue sky goal, and obviously if you hit it, then you really made it and stuff. And so I always look at trade compliance that way. I mean, I know trade compliance is not really building a business or anything like that. You're building a program, you're building efficiencies within your organization, within your department. And I say organization because it's not about being effective and building a good program within your team. It's actually for the whole organization. The whole organization needs to be part of this, the engineers, the purchasing, everybody, the C-suites, everybody needs to have a buy-in on this. But I just kind of just exploring a little bit more about that. Like, what do you feel could be let's call them floor goals. This goal is the minimum that I need to do versus what should I aspire to do? What is this great goal, for my compliance when I'm setting up a program to make sure that it is, let's call it bulletproof into the future?
Well, I'll answer that in sort of a roundabout way if I could, because I think companies that I've worked with and now clients too, I come in or my company comes in and we see a lot of different procedures, and they're usually really good procedures that a trade compliance group puts together. But they're all sort of all over the place, but they're out there. They're available for people in the business to access those procedures, but they don't know when to access it. So when you have this sort of hodgepodge of procedures, you need that umbrella to pull it all together. And I love the word you use, the framework. And I think it's that's really what you have to set out. So a framework that defines what the trade compliance group does, and then what the trade compliance group does can interact with the different functions and activities within the business. So from a minimum perspective, I always think about the elements of a compliance program. And in my view, it boils down to 5 things. I think every department and agency in U.S. government and governments around the world talk about compliance programs, but you have to have policies and procedures. Your policy could just be your code of conduct and a statement within your code of conduct that you abide by international trade laws when applicable, something like that. But you have to have those policies and procedures. You have to have monitoring. You have to have an annual risk assessment because, as we just talked about, things change. Today, now they're changing every day or every hour, but things change. So you have to understand where your risk is. You have to have training or learning elements, and then you have to have a system. I don't think anybody can do trade compliance anymore without some sort of system or solution to help them. And there's a lot of really cool things coming out, I think, now with AI, but you need to have some sort of trade management system too. So at a minimum, I think you have to consider those 5 elements of a global program and start building on it. It doesn't have to be perfect. I think we all know trade compliance programs are never done. You're never finished building your program. You're always going to have to enhance it and keep going. But that's where I would start, just thinking about those 5 elements. What do you have in those 5 elements? And then what else do you need to plug in?
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I usually look at it, and again, just running our business or looking at other aspects. Even again, I even relate it to our personal lives, right? But it's looking at the one big thing or big themes that will make that change, versus concentrating or just focusing on all the little stuff, the little to-do things. Like let's talk about what is the one big thing that's going to be effective, in my trade compliance program that is going to maybe take care of every little to-dos that I have, to get there, right? So, but that actually does make sense. And in expanding, I guess, a little bit on that, I remember when we had Steve here on the show, one of the questions that we had, or one of the discussions we had, we were talking about how in his organization, because he is part of a humongous organization over at Bayer, he did talk about how they left no stone unturned. In other words, today, yes, we have tariffs on products coming from certain countries, and we have stacked tariffs depending on what your product is, where it's coming from. Sometimes you worry about, well, how am I going to make it? And I heard this story. We were at the NCBFAA conference, not even maybe a couple of weeks ago. But anyway, I heard a story from a broker whose client, obviously here in the real world, you don't, if you're a importer for your store, for example, you're not going to order as inventory runs out. You're usually planning months in advance, right? And he was telling us this story. It's not a funny story. It's actually a pretty sad story, but it's a small retailer with a small shop, and they obviously planned 5 months ago before even Trump was around. Well, I guess he might have gotten elected already, but without knowing what was going to happen. And he ordered his line for his spring and summer line. And so he obviously ordered 5 container-fulls of product. And he's a broker for that. And so what happened is it was on the way already, then the big Chinese tariffs, I think it changed like 2 or 3 times within a day or two, right? It kept on going up and up. One kept on raising each other's ante. There is like, okay, well, I'll raise you this much. I'll raise you this much. And so I think it ended up to 100 and whatever, 45, 50, whatever it is at now. Anyway, the customer of his said, you know what do I do? I cannot pay that. I don't have the cash flow to pay it. And even if I do, people are not going to buy with a markup. And so he just abandoned the ship. Well, I don't know if it had arrived yet. He just and then sadly enough, I guess I've been hearing that's what a lot of people are doing. They're just either abandoning their shipments or figuring out somebody who may buy it and just at nothing, pennies on the dollar, right? And just to get rid of it. But anyway, in that, Steve did talk about programs that may benefit you that he may not have been, or other companies. He said they use every program they can to try to mitigate or help with tariffs and duties and savings and stuff like that. What do you see with your clients? Do you see that, or how do you help with your clients in exploring other avenues? I mean, the biggest example that I've been using is companies have stopped recently or in recent years using USMCA because their product is duty free. So what the heck, I'm not going to use it, right? But now, if your product may be duty free, but not the IEPAs or anything that they stack up on top of it, right? But if you declare USMCA, then you are duty free, because they won't apply those IEPAs or any other additional duties. So what have you seen, or what have you helped customers?
Yeah, well, I think you're right. I mean, USMCA is applicable for now. So understanding if your goods qualify, and of course, there are resources that have to be put into qualifications, which is why a lot of companies weren't using it, because if it's unconditionally free, duty free, then why use it? But I think that all it sort of goes back to make sure your classifications are correct too. So we're seeing a lot of companies revisiting their classification database and making sure everything's classified in the right way. But I think probably the biggest opportunity, in my view, besides USMCA or another free trade agreement, is looking at your valuation methodologies, and particularly if you're doing intercompany valuations. Intercompany transactions, I should say, looking at your transfer price. I think a lot of companies look at, have always tax has always sort of ruled what their transfer price method is. But now with these really high tariffs, maybe you need to relook at your transfer price. And is there a way to carve out some of those non-dutiable charges from your transfer price? We're seeing a lot of clients start to engage there and work with their CPA firm or other tax incentive firms to do that. There's other methods, valuation methods, and schemes that could be used, like for sale. So really finding ways to reduce the value, so the percentage of duty that you pay is on a lower value, of course. And then, like you said, looking at all the free trade agreement opportunities or special trade programs, I think duty drawback is, I'm trying to keep up too, but duty drawback is still an option on some of these tariffs. So if that does apply, and you're bringing goods into the U.S. that are going to leave or some other way to use drawback, just looking at all those special trade programs and other optimization opportunities.
Great. No, and so within that, so we're talking about like different programs that maybe you may be able to take advantage of, maybe different ideas or points of view, not point of view, actually, just different ways of doing trade to help your program. These are like the immediate things that we're working on right now. One of the things that, but going further, and like you said, I mean, building a better and stronger program, more resilient and plug and play, like you call it. Let's say in building a framework, you need to establish, I guess, a better foundation or for that framework so that it doesn't collapse or fall apart. And forgive me if I'm like, I hope I'm not putting words into your mouth or anything, but I'm just basing it on like how maybe I may operate or think, right? But I'm trying to apply it, I guess, to how you the idea or the concept that you gave us, but. I was thinking also here at Global Training Center, we like to teach and preach almost. Let's just call it that, preach the idea that the trade compliance department cannot be successful unless you create a trade compliance culture within your organization. Everybody needs to have a buy-in, and we touched a little bit on that before. There is this philosophy that in marketing, I guess I did a lot of business classes in marketing, even back in the day. It's been years since I've been in school, but even back in the day, there was this idea that in marketing that people don't really care about you. They say, you hear sometimes like car sales commercials, it's about me. No, well, no, don't talk about yourself. Talk about the client, because the client cares about themselves. They like to feel special and all that. So in working or thinking about that idea, I always thought about this within an organization. So, purchasing things about, and again, it's not like they're being self-centered or anything. They're worrying about their job, right? They're worrying about their function, but they worry about what they need to do on purchasing, how to get, their department effective and efficient. So does engineering, so does, sales, et cetera. So we have all these departments that are obviously looking out for the better of their company, but through their function. Let's talk about that a little bit, I guess. Let's see how do you feel, or how when you go in and you talk to a client, is there anything that you do to, let's say, build that foundation and build that framework a little better, in that you can help? Do you get like other departments? Do you tell them, hey, get me the head of procurement or whatever? Like purchasing, for example, you would want them to know that they're working with or dealing with groups that are probably not sourcing from China, or forced labor. That was a buzzword last year, right? That was the 2024 worry that we had. Whereas now it's tariffs. That kind of went in the back burner. It doesn't mean it's gone away, but it's just people don't seem to be talking too much about that. But how do you integrate or help integrate all that and create that true trade compliance culture to build that framework?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I was thinking of so many things as you were speaking because I believe in everything you just said. I think culture is built on trust. So there has to be, that trust element. I start my conversations with new clients. Even before I start a conversation, I personally, and anybody that's going to be on a call with a new client from my team, we read their 10K. If it's a public company, we go on and read their 10K. And probably about half the time by reading the 10K, I know more about the company's footprint than the person I'm talking to. And there is so much good information in there. And to really understand how the company is set up, how it's structured, is it a regional focus or is it a product line focus? And you can really sort of get your head around then how you can build trade compliance in. So by doing that and then going into a conversation with the client or the new client, it really starts to build that trust because we took the time to understand who the company is and what they do, what their products are from what we can tell by looking at their website and reading their 10K and reading their code of conduct and their values. And I think for me, that's where it starts. When we do a risk assessment, if there's not enough information that we've been able to glean from 10Ks or websites or whatever, we will ask the company to do a landscape assessment. And really what we want to know is just really what's your footprint? Where are you sourcing from? Where are you exporting to? Where are your manufacturing sites? Where are your R&D sites? And all of those things help us identify that risk. I think there are some companies that have great data lakes of information that you can then, sort of pull what you need from that. But other companies don't. I was just talking to some oil and gas majors yesterday that were telling me their information is all over the place and they're trying to find a way to bring it all together. And they have so many ERP systems that they haven't been able to consolidate. So understanding the footprint of the company is my first step, and I think it's got to be the first step of anybody in a trade compliance role. You need to know what you're dealing with, and then go into your point about the different functions. They just want to know what's important to them, and this goes to our plug and play methodology, what we call the Amalie method, is that, we really want to focus our procedures on what that particular function or activity in the corporation does. So for procurement, you're not going to teach them things that HR needs to know or that IT needs to know. You're just going to focus on what they need to know. So by building that procedure, you also do your training or your learning elements around that same procedure. So there has to be a basis. What is trade compliance? I think in buckets because I have this really simple brain. If I can put something in a bucket, then I feel like I can tackle it. So starting with understanding how I started my part of the conversation today. Trade compliance is sanctions, export controls, import compliance, and boycott. These are the 4 things we're going to talk about. These are the things that happen in procurement. This is sort of a real base layer of what those 4 things mean. And this is what we need you to know, procurement. We need to know the reason we need to know country of origin is because it can affect your tariff rate or it can affect your ability to qualify for a free trade agreement. And, by having all these different data elements and helping us gather that information from a trade compliance perspective, we can save the company money. And I think I used to say the getting into duty optimization opportunities, which are all the rage right now. That was always the sexy part of customs compliance, I thought, and it's where you get into strategic thinking with the business, and that's the fun stuff. So,
I mean, there might be resistance in the beginning. It's like, now I need to learn about tariffs or trade, and that's not even my job. Do you find that once you explain or that you start working with them, that they totally get it? Like, I mean, this is oh gosh, this is really going to happen. I am helping the company, lo and behold, this is going to help. I mean, do you see like all of a sudden like an aha moment, let's call it, or like remember that show Mythbusters? Like somebody said, this is going to happen, and if you do this or this, and then you go bust that myth, and it's like, well, no, actually, if you do this way, look at how great this is going to be for your company. I don't know, just something like that.
I think so. I think where I see that sort of aha moment is when we can show really practical examples of how companies have been able to use the program methodology or the Amalie method to make things, to do things better and to keep up with the regulations and everything that happens. I think it is, again, like I've always said, my superpower is simplifying things, because I feel like I've got a simple brain that just, I've got to keep it sort of straight in my own mind. And I want to break it down. So I'm a lawyer by training, but I really love the program and operational side. That's why I started a consulting company and didn't join a law firm. I want to help companies, do that practical stuff. And I believe that's all done through program work. And it's really boiling it down to what are the quick wins we can put in place to help the company, to make things more effective, to make things more efficient. And I do get a lot of aha moments when we talk about that.
Great. Well, I guess in the interest of time, I guess we can start, winding down here a little bit. Is there any other, like, how do you want to wrap this all up? I mean, we're talking about how you want to build a good, resilient framework and program. Is there any way you want to like put like a good, nice little pretty bow on top of this and have someone walk away with a really good piece of takeaway here?
I would love to. I think, I do think a couple things, and these are sort of Ellenisms. I have these thoughts that I always share with my team. One is every export turns into an import. So don't divide your world between export controls and import or customs compliance. They have to be talking to each other. There has to be that handoff in companies. You have to know your landscape. You have to know your footprint around the world. And that includes not only where your operations are, but where you're sourcing and where your R&D is, particularly today with R&D and technology issues, emerging technologies. So understand your footprint, understand the elements of a program and how that can work for your company, and get out and talk to people, right? I always say, like, if trade compliance people that sit around and wait for questions to come to them are not doing their company any favors. We intersect, as I said earlier, with every function and activity within a corporation. And it's really, the trade compliance people should be the best friends of everybody in the company. And I think you really need to get out and understand what your company does to be able to be an effective trade compliance professional.
Well, awesome. I mean, yeah, that's good advice there and good information. Thank you so much for coming on our show.
Thank
you. Again, we have Alan Smith from Amalie.
There we go.
Amalie. From Amalie Trade. And what we'll do is just like every show, everybody, y'all look down in the show notes. And for sure, we'll have her contact information in there if you do need to or would like to reach out. And just anything like that. I do want to remind everybody of a few things. We are slowly but surely creating this trade community platform that we're building here at our Global Training Center. If you do want to be part of it, this is where we can like continue conversations like this with that we had with Alan, maybe within the listeners themselves, and just help each other. That's part of our try to contribute here to the trade community is where people can help each other. I mean, what I may not know something but somebody else may, and or I may know something that somebody else doesn't, and we can start sharing things like that, and we all learn from each other. But we hope we can start building that. So just check the show notes on that as well, just so you can get in early and put your email there, so that when we're ready to launch, we're ready to send you over to that community. But thank you all. Thank you again, Ellen. Hope that we can continue talking to you. You're first time on our show, but I don't think we've ever had a guest who has only been the first time. We've always had repeat appearances, so we'll reach out again. And if you ever have any interesting ideas or topics that you want to talk to us, just let us know. Same with everybody else out there. Just let us know. But thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Thank you. Yes, y'all have a good day, and we'll talk to you all soon. Thank you very much for joining us. Simply Trade is brought to you by the generous contributions of Global Training Center. You can follow the show and GTC on LinkedIn or Twitter and other social networks. Make sure you check out the show notes in the description for a full rundown of today's show with all the important links. Also, make sure that you share this with a friend and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. We really like hearing from you. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to rate and review wherever you listen to this podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the show, or would like to sponsor Simply Trade, or suggest any topic you would like for us to discuss, please contact us via email at simplytrade@globaltrainingcenter.com, or you can DM us on Twitter at simplytradepod. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Happy trading. Simply Trade is not a law firm or an advisor. The topics and discussions conducted by Simply Trade hosts and guests should not be considered and is not intended to substitute legal advice. You should seek appropriate counsel for your own situations. These conversations and information are directed towards listeners in the United States for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only, and should not be substituted for legal advice. No listener or viewer of this podcast should act or refrain from acting on the basis of information on this podcast without first seeking legal advice from counsel. Information on this podcast may not be up to date depending on the time of publishing and the time of viewership. The content of this posting is provided as is. No representations are made that the content is error-free. The views expressed in or through this podcast are those of the individual speakers, not those of their respective employers or Global Training Center as a whole. All liability with respect to actions taken or not taken based on the contents of this podcast are hereby expressly disclaimed.